Welcome into our Pella Window postgame show, where I say, for the final time here, at least for the 2019 season, we're live at the UGA bookstore. You see the UGA bookstore's very own SEC East champion T-shirt. I'm lucky enough to be able to wear that tonight, and the Dawgs on top once again, 19-13 over the Texas A&M Aggies. We will talk about the good and the bad for Georgia from its win against A&M here coming up throughout our program. And, of course, I'll remind you that if you're tuning in, you're somewhere around the campus right now, around the Athens area, stop on by and see us. We're up here on the second floor of the UGA bookstore. Jeff Sentell will be here in a moment. We'll talk to him about a lot of recruiting stuff, including the, I guess, somewhat, I don't want to say surprising that he chose Utah. I should say that he chose Oregon, but surprising announcement last night from Noah Sewell choosing Oregon over Georgia. We'll do Jeff Sentell on that and everything else involving the recruiting day and his thoughts on the 19-13 Georgia win over the Aggies here. We'll take a lot of your comments there as well. But as I said before, if you're kind of in that Athens area, if you're around the campus, stop on by and see us up here on the second floor. We'll love to say hello to you, and it's a great chance to do some Christmas shopping, some holiday shopping here at the UGA bookstore as well. And, of course, we appreciate Pella Window and Door for bringing all this to us tonight here as well. So in life, there are really like three different ways you can look at things. You can be optimistic, you can be pessimistic, you can be realistic. And I think that we'll divide Georgia fans into three categories tonight. The pessimistic fan who just can't get over the fact that the Georgia offense continues to sputter. The Georgia offense is just fighting, scratching, and clawing for everything it can get in any single moment. Yes, weather's a factor again in the first half of this tonight. We've kind of been there and done that here this season. Yes, George Pickens kind of has a couple of moments where he kind of really showed you the flashes of what I believe his career is going to be about here at UGA, but no doubt some offensive problems. Maybe the pessimistic Georgia fan sees a lot of that. The realistic Georgia fan may see it somewhere along the lines of, hey, even with all of this, Georgia's still very much in the mix for the college football playoff. Number 4 team in the country after last week. I don't expect that to drop down here this week. Obviously, if it wins out, it's going to be in the college football playoff. And the optimistic Georgia fan may even take it a step further and say, as I wrote in the Dog Nation Forum a little earlier tonight, that if you put aside the Georgia offense for a moment and what it kind of isn't right now, if you just look at this Georgia defense, which once again holds an opponent to 13 points, they've kept everybody this season at 20 or less all season long. That's how dominant the Georgia defense has been. If you just push aside the Georgia offense for a moment and just focus in on this defense, here's a fair statement that I believe you can make. That it's just as hard to score on Georgia's defense right now as it is to stop LSU's offense from scoring. And defense is never going to get quite as many headlines. It's never going to get quite as much attention as the offensive side of the ball. We just kind of understand that about football in general. But if you watch games closely, the Georgia games closely, the LSU games closely, the two likely opponents for the SEC championship, LSU has to win officially tonight to clinch its spot there. I think it's fair to say that scoring on Georgia is just as difficult as stopping LSU from scoring. So I still feel like that we're in for quite a showdown in the SEC championship game between Georgia and LSU. And there are going to be plenty of Georgia fans, maybe more towards that pessimistic degree like I mentioned a moment ago, who say, but yeah, Georgia can't score enough to truly win when it gets there. I'm going to let that kind of stuff take care of itself. You know, predictions about what will happen in the future, I'm just not interested in making those right now. I said this week on Dog Nation Daily, that for me, any kind of win tonight would be something I would kind of exhale over, be happy with, move on, and get ready for the next one, and then obviously the SEC championship. And the game kind of worked out the way that many of you kind of maybe feared that it might. A little ugly at times, a little messy at times, a little rain-soaked at times. Georgia found a way to win. It closes out the home slate here with a W over the Texas A&M Aggies, and it gets ready to move on. And I'm sure you all have plenty to say about that tonight. So let's pop over and do a good number of these. I'll do YouTube first, then we'll go through a bunch of comments there on Facebook as well. And as I said before, Jeff Sentell will join us here in just a little bit too. You may have to be patient with me just for a moment, though. Early after the game, sometimes in the immediate aftermath, as people are spilling out of Sanford Stadium, the internet can be a little bit slow around campus. So we're going to let this kind of pull up and kind of get going. We'll get some YouTube comments. I'll see if Facebook's moving any faster right now, and we'll kind of get those up and going as a part of our Pella Window postgame show live from the UGA bookstore. Georgia wins by a final score of 19-13. While I'm waiting for the comments to pop up, I'll give you a few stats here. So the number that's going to be interesting to a lot of folks, the fact that Jake Fromm does struggle a bit throwing the ball today. He finds 163 yards in the air, but that's on 11 of 23 passing. Does have the touchdown to George Pickens. That was pretty much it from the air for Georgia as far as running the ball. DeAndre Swift, what another courageous performance for him. 19 carries, 103 yards. He averages 5.4 yards per carry. Brian Herring chipped in with 10 carries for 30 yards himself. As far as receiving goes, DeAndre Swift ends up the leading receiver for Georgia as we've called for this. We've called for them to, if the middle of the field is being taken away by a stack box, then why not try to throw the ball to Swift more? Well, tonight they tried that. 4 catches for Swift. He totals 29 yards through the air here today. George Pickens comes up with 2 catches for 57 yards. One of those, obviously, as we mentioned before, the touchdown. Defensively, nice day for Richard LeCount, who was all over the place, picking up tackles and also forcing that one fumble there as well. A big-time performance as Georgia fans stopped by to see us here at the UGA bookstore. They are feeling great about this here in our Pella Window post-game show. Another big win for the Dawgs. So we'll talk about all of that here coming up. Let's see if we can get the YouTube comments kind of up and running here. Looks like they are indeed doing that. So we'll kind of get rolling with a lot of that right now and see if we can get the internet to cooperate here with us a bit. Still waiting on some of those to pull up. So let me give you a few more stats kind of while we're waiting to get there. As far as what Kellen Mond does today, 42 attempts for Mond through the air, ends up throwing for 275 yards. He does get the touchdown there late on the one real long drive. But the one thing that we've kind of always focused on all year long was what Georgia yields on the ground. We even this week kind of highlighted the fact that, against lesser competition in recent weeks, Texas A&M had found some ground success. Isaiah Spiller in particular had kind of found some ground success, but against the better teams A&M had played this season, running the football is not something that the Aggies were able to do. Well, tonight that story is going to be told in a big way. Now, some of this is going to end up being sack yardage, so when you kind of pull all of that out, it'll look a little bit different. But overall, just the cold hard truth here is that Spiller and Mond, the only 2 guys to run the ball tonight for A&M, and they ended up for the game, once you factor in the sack yardage, negative 1 yard rushing for Texas A&M. So kind of a big night for the Dawgs when it comes to, once again, holding a team under a big rushing total, and that's obviously one of the main reasons why Georgia ends up winning this game tonight. Over here on YouTube, let me get Elite GB, who says, we did what we did to win, and yeah, listen, that is kind of the story for Georgia this season. The offense is just going to leave something to be desired. By this point in time, the die is cast. The sort of story has been etched in stone. This is a great defense and an offense trying to do just enough to kind of get by. And once again tonight, that was the case. But for me, when you think about moving towards an SEC championship and something along those lines, it's a lot easier for me to kind of think about what this defense can do to keep Georgia in the game than it is to spend a whole bunch of time kind of harping on something at this point in time we've just sort of had our piece with. And that's not my attempt to defend it. It's not my attempt to explain it away. I've just sort of learned to live with it. And I guess that's my way of kind of enjoying the rest of the season. Ronald Watson says BA won't read negative Fromm comments. No, I mean, we can take the show wherever you guys want to go to. I'm not going to sit here and be negative all night long because I've got an SEC championship T-shirt on. Georgia's moving on, getting a big win over Texas A&M, the first time in SEC conference play. So I'm not going to wallow in negativity, but we can certainly hash out anything that you want to. I think if you're I guess, over-obsessed with what Georgia didn't do offensively, I think that potentially obscures you from appreciating what Georgia did do defensively and the fact that Georgia's in the thick of the college football playoff race. You don't have to be a perfect team to win it all. Georgia is going to try to do this as certainly an imperfect team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But listen, no one's got exactly everything they want. And the Georgia offense right now is not great. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I'm also not going to wallow in the misery of it really either. Ron Warbington says, why don't you question Fromm? Yeah, I mean, listen, I thought that Fromm had some bad throws tonight. I thought there were some things that he certainly could have done better, for sure. Jermaine Jones says Swift got heated there at the end of the game, and that's going to happen. Football's an intense sport. Intense in terms of the team that you're competing with, intense alongside the guys you're competing alongside of against your opponent. And I'm not scandalized by that. I don't think anybody else there is either. Hard Times 57 says we can't win with Fromm playing like this. The thing of it is, though, Georgia won tonight. And, A&M is 15th in Football Power Index from ESPN. They're the top 25 from Football Outsiders FEI. This is a team that I think is clearly one of the 25 best teams in the country. And, they were stymied defensively for most of the night. Maybe makes it seem like they're not. But, for me, this is another quality opponent that Georgia was able to get tonight. I mean, you make a case that A&M was best one of the season up to this point for both Clemson and Alabama. Now you say, well, maybe Clemson and Alabama looked better against those teams than Georgia did. That's fine. But you just add this into the hopper with what has already been kind of a pretty strong collection of resume-building wins for Georgia. Look, this is not me being, at least I don't think it is. You can, I guess, judge for yourself. This is not me being some sort of sunshine pumper. Everything's great and it's only going to get better. I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I'm not trying to tell you that what you think you saw didn't happen. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. I'm just telling you that you can still win it all, even if you have some areas of your roster that are not completely performing at a national championship level. You don't have to be completely perfect at all 22 starting positions to go out and win it all. You just have to be able to put yourself in the position to play well when you need to. Will Georgia do that? I have no idea. Some of you are going to say, well, based on what I've seen thus far this season, I predict not. That's fine. Your prediction doesn't happen to mean a whole lot to me. I played the clip of Tom Brady on the show this week saying about his own offense, the Patriots. It doesn't matter what any of us think. It just matters what Georgia does. And that's kind of my thing on this too. If you're super negative on the Georgia offense right now, and gosh knows I've been as much of a critic of it during the season as anyone has. I've written about it at DawgNation.com. I've talked about it on Dawg Nation Daily. But at this point in time, it's all been said. There's nothing we learned new tonight about the Georgia offense that we didn't already know. They struggle throwing the ball, and because of those struggles through the air, it becomes easier to stop the running game. We have known that now since September. We just have. And tonight was kind of another example of what we've kind of already known to be true. So we can sort of sit here and just sort of yell and scream and just kind of wallow in that misery, or we can say, wouldn't it be curious if a Georgia defense that I believe is every bit the equal of the LSU offense, wouldn't it be interesting to see that group step up and pull Georgia through in a game like that there as well? Because as concerned as Georgia is about its offense, I can promise you LSU is just as concerned about its defense. Did you happen to see the LSU Ole Miss game from a week ago? So we can kind of go through all of that. Michael Corson says the Georgia offense is regressing. Yeah, maybe. For me, though, I'm having a good time. I mean, Georgia's the SEC East champion. Georgia's going to play in the national the SEC championship. Georgia next week can cap off an 11-1 regular season. Honestly, I don't have all that much to be upset about. It's not a great offense right now. It's not. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. But I'm willing to let this ride play out. I'm just kind of willing to see where this is going to go, and we'll see what Jeff Sentell has to say about this in a moment. Let me see if I can get the Facebook comments kind of cranked up and running here on a night when Georgia has beaten Texas A&M by a final score of 19-13. Somebody says, just win, baby, quoting Al Davis, another NFL quote that's probably applicable here. And, yeah, I don't think the win should completely obscure all the things that go on during the game. But at this point in time, what goes on during the game for me is just not new information. This is just sort of what it is. The days of being sad about Georgia not having a good offense, for me, those tears have kind of all dried up. I have just kind of learned to live with it. And I guess that would be my kind of advice for everybody else there as well. Donald Leiden says, one game at a time, I pray every night for another win. Yeah, and in addition to praying for those additional wins, my advice would be to kind of enjoy them when they come, too. Gary King says a field goal fest is not going to get it done against LSU. You may be right about that, but you don't get anything for making that prediction right now. So if you're a Georgia fan, why wouldn't you just enjoy the process that they're about to go through? Why don't we just try to enjoy it? You may very well be right. But if you are, no one's going to remember 2 weeks from now, well, you know what Gary King told us during our Pella Window postgame show. He said a field goal fest wasn't getting it done. I mean, obviously we all know there's a chance that Georgia won't score enough to win against LSU. But I'm not willing to wave the white flag on that yet, no matter how bad the offense may have played for most of the night tonight. Kelly Chitwood says, guys, we won against Texas A&M. And I guess that's kind of my point there as well. And this is not for me to say that you don't have a right to question some of the things that went on, or you don't have a right to point out some of the things that, you wish could be better. You obviously got a right to do that, and I kind of understand where you're kind of, coming from on all of that. But if your anger about the ineptitude of Georgia's offense is so great that you can't appreciate wins, you can't appreciate the defense, you can't look forward to the SEC championship game, then I think you're doing fandom wrong. It's just my opinion anyway. Keelan Richter says, let me get the comment here. Maybe it's Kylan, I'm sorry. Kylan Richter says, I agree with you. I don't care if we beat LSU 3-0, go Dogs. And yeah, listen, I think tonight you saw some things from a Georgia defense where it's been continually put into tough situations by this Georgia offense all year long. but they are equal to the challenge seemingly every time. I know there was a kind of a long drive late at the end of the game, but that score that A&M mounted in the fourth quarter was to get the Aggies to the 13 total, okay? I mean, this is a Georgia defense that remains as stingy as any group in the country. And trust me, the sort of sweat sessions, the sort of difficult film study that Georgia's doing to try to find some way to score some points against LSU, I can promise you, Joe Brady, for as smart a coach as he is, Steve Ensminger to the extent that he still does anything for LSU's offense, he's maybe offensive coordinator in name only at this point in time, I can promise you, they're spending just as much time in the film room trying to figure out some sort of vulnerability with this Georgia defense. They're doing just as much of that as Georgia is doing trying to figure out how to find some points. I can promise you, it's just the same thing. There's nobody in Baton Rouge right now who thinks this game is going to be easy. And there's no Georgia fan tonight more upset about a win or upset more about a win than, say, LSU fans were last week after they let John Rice Plumlee run all over them in their, 3-touchdown win against Ole Miss. I mean, over the course of a long 12-game season, you're just going to see some imperfections pop up. And for Georgia, it's been the same crop of imperfections throughout the year. This is not a good offense. Does that mean that you're just going to wave the white flag and surrender? Or are you going to buckle your chin strap and try to play as much defense as you can, try to find as many rushing yards as you can, and try to find the way to fight, scratch, and claw and win the game somehow? I know which of those two choices I'm going to make, but we'll get more of your comments coming up on this in just a moment. It's all brought to you tonight by our friends at Pella Window and Door. They can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. They're family-owned and operated, which means you get the local service that you really kind of come to expect from Pella Window and Door, but they've also got the power of kind of having a national company backing them, which is a really good thing. You can also get 40% off qualifying installations right now or 0% APR for 48 months. That offer is valid through January the 9th, so make sure you jump on, take advantage of that, especially as we head towards the holidays or we head towards this kind of cold weather season where, let's face it, when you got the heat on at night, tonight's going to be down in the 40s. That means your heat's probably on at home again. Don't let that energy slip out of your house. Energy-efficient windows and doors helps kind of keep it inside the house where it's supposed to be, which over the long run could save you money on your energy bills. So a couple ways to get in touch. PellaSoutheast.us. That's PellaSoutheast.us. Or give them a call in the Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. That number, once again, 404-445-2979. All right, we'll get more of your Facebook comments. I'll go back over to YouTube here in a moment. We will honor the Georgia seniors as part of tonight's show. We'll hear from Jeff Sentell there as well. Sheldon Rogers says these, quote, hold-off wins won't get us in. As far as Georgia getting in, Georgia's got nothing to worry about in that regard. Georgia's got 2 scheduled games remaining, a game against Georgia Tech and an SEC championship game against likely LSU, which is up 7-0 right now, 9 minutes to go first quarter against Arkansas. If Georgia wins both those games, it will moonwalk into the college football playoff. There is, the need, I guess, for what you call beauty pageant wins where you say, well, Georgia won, but it wasn't all that impressive. That kind of stuff ended in October. In the month of November, Georgia's been playing Florida and Auburn on the road and A&M tonight. The idea that Georgia needs to somehow put up a score that's impressive. You know who needs to do that? Alabama. Alabama needs to do that because they don't have any good wins. And so today they're kind of left to try to beat, Western Carolina 66-3. And they're going to try to do that next Saturday on the road at Auburn. They've got to do scoreboard, showcase. They've got to do these, whatever you want to call them, kind of beauty pageant type wins. Georgia doesn't have to do that right now. Georgia's collecting resume wins. A&M was another one of those here today. So the idea that Georgia has to, with some sort of score, impress the committee, I just don't think that's the case. Georgia, by beating Georgia Tech, by having won tonight, and by winning the SEC championship game, which is the big one on the horizon, Georgia's going to be easily in the college football playoff. Now, what happens after that, we'll have to, I guess, wait and see, assuming those big wins can kind of come. Anthony Vino-Sneed says our defense dominated the entire game, and the fact that they had a chance to win at the end is disappointing. Exact replica of the Auburn game. Yeah, it is an exact replica of the Auburn game. In a lot of ways, it's the exact replica of the Georgia season. I'm not going to tell you it's not hard to try to do it this way. That's not what I'm saying. There's not a single part of me that's saying that this is an easy way to try to win championships, because when you lean on your defense as much as Georgia is, you definitely reduce your margin for error just greatly, right? I mean, the margin for error is almost completely eliminated. So obviously, this is a very, very difficult way to try to do all of this. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But thus far, the defense keeps answering the challenge. So I guess my advice would be, instead of worrying about when that's going to come to an end, Appreciate the fact that that storyline lives on for another day. We'll get Jeff Sentell coming up here in just a moment. Cale Davis says, BA, do you think this offense can beat LSU? Obviously, Georgia's going to be a point spread underdog against LSU, Cale, for a good reason. But do I think the SEC championship is going to be some kind of blowout, even with Georgia once again sputtering on offense? I really don't. I just don't. I mean, I'll keep saying this. I believe for LSU, trying to score on Georgia is just as difficult as it is for Georgia trying to figure out a way to score on anybody. I do. So am I, speaking as a fan here for a moment, am I scared of LSU? No, I'm not. I'm not scared of LSU. Georgia won't be picked to win the game. Vegas was going to make LSU a favorite, and understandably maybe so, given the fact that LSU is undefeated on the season. But no, I'm not scared of LSU, nor do I think that you should be scared of LSU either. There is a chance that, much the same way the story kind of regenerates each and every week, really great defense, just barely enough offense, and maybe not enough offense when it matters, there's a chance the season's going to end exactly the way that some of you think it is. I'm just sort of willing to let it play out before we get there. Let me bring in Jeff Sentell on this, and we'll bring him a little closer, see if we can kind of get him so everybody can kind of see him good. So, Jeff, let me bring you in on the conversation. Georgia wins 19-13. My take on this is this. I knew Georgia's offense wasn't good before this game started. I didn't learn anything new about that tonight. Georgia does not have a good offense. I'm sort of over that now. And I'm more amazed by the fact that Georgia keeps winning when I think of as quality games against SEC opponents. Last week on the road, this week against Texas A&M, who needed this game badly tonight for a coach who makes about $8 million a year. I guess I'm more impressed with the fact that the defense keeps finding a way to win in these games and the offense gives them really nothing. I'm just sort of more impressed by the fact they keep finding a way to win these games. But I can tell you that on both Facebook and YouTube right now, it's one criticism complaint after the other for the Georgia offense. Jeff, I understand where it's coming from. I've seen the same level of play that they've seen. But at this point in time, what are you going to do about it at this point in time?
You know, it's funny, Brandon. Sometimes the simplest analysis makes the most sense. What was the motto for the Georgia team this year? Do more.
Right.
That's what everybody wants to see out of that offense. Do more. Is it capable of more? I'm going to maybe counsel folks to look back at this is a long time ago, 87 New York Giants, 1991 New York Giants. They were just defensively better than all the teams they face. And I know everybody wants to see all phases. They all want to see the complete game. But we have 11 games of data here, Brandon. This is the Georgia football team. And I think you and I, on one of these very shows, we're just kind of championing that fact. I mean, what did Georgia, if Georgia hits that pass to George Pickens, that flea flicker early, that's the spark. I mean, the funny thing, Brandon.
But they just haven't been hitting that all year long.
I know. It's nothing different. This is indicative of the entire season. But the thing is Georgia doesn't have to have those big plays offensively. I mean, I'm just walking, I have a walk, where I come from the bowl of the stadium all the way up here. I go upstairs. And I just say this Georgia Bulldog football team, they just want to put you in their arena and they want to play with you. And they want to suffocate you defensively and make you try to score. And Georgia, let's look at this. Another game turnover free. Georgia's not trying high-risk plays. They're protecting the ball. I think sometimes they're protecting the ball too much. I know people look at offensive coordinator this, offensive coordinator that, and handcuffing. And there are times when what Georgia's got going looks really good. And then
not very much. I mean, not very much though. Not very much. I mean,
2 seconds later, it doesn't look very good. That's the point I was trying to make. They look good for flashes, for one or two plays, and then it's not finding the open receiver, or it's a procedure penalty that turns a 1st and 10 into a 1st and 25. They just don't put together enough great plays on offense to even be a very good offense.
And the reason why I say this is because Rob Collins says, I want to make sure I read this comment. He says, BA, stop making excuses. We have 5 stars all over the field, a receiver and on the offensive line. Rob, here's the thing I want to make sure that I make clear. I'm not making excuses. If you say that it should have been better than it has been this year, for the most part, I probably agree with you. I guess I probably do agree with you on that. I don't want to obscure that point. You say, given the talent level that's there, it ought to be better than the production has been thus far. I kind of agree with you on that. But moving now to the 12th regular season game next Saturday, at this point in time, it's just not going to be better than this. And it may take us 6 hours to sort of figure out why. We could all weigh in with our thoughts. We could all share our thoughts. there may not be an answer. I may not be smart enough to come up with the answer. If there is one, we may all have different answers. But if you want to say the offense should be better than it is, I probably agree with you. But at this point in time, it's just not. This is a unbelievable, great championship-level defense, and the offense, you just hope sort of has enough. And the idea that you can predict now if it will or if it won't against LSU, I don't think college football is as easy to predict as that. I really don't. Is there a chance that Georgia could get some of the big wins that Georgia fans crave for them to get? Is there a chance it could happen with defense alone? I think there's at least some chance that could happen. Is it a great chance? Is it a likely chance? More likely than not? Maybe not, but this is the cards that you have been dealt at this point in time, and my advice would be to find a way to enjoy the ride the rest of the way. And don't back yourself into a corner with your own prediction now, because you may regret the things that you say now later. You may end up being right, but if you end up being right, you're not going to feel any better about it anyway.
Wow. I mean, folks, I just, when you look at this football team, what's the definition of better? Play better, be better. I think it's only one or two more plays, Brandon, and that's what they get. Instead of a Rodrigo field goal, he had 4 tonight, by the way, becomes Georgia's all-time leading scorer. Instead of it being 4 field goals for Rodrigo, maybe it's 2. And maybe Georgia ekes out another 8 points, where if they're playing their best football, maybe 1 or 2 more of these shots offensively go Georgia's way. But, I mean, is there a point where, Brandon, if Georgia does this against LSU, that people will just realize that this is just the identity of this team, and it's a winning identity for the way they're comprised?
Well, to be fair, what people are saying, though, is not they don't like the style with which Georgia's winning. What they're saying is, and I'm going to defend the commenters here for a moment, what they're saying is they don't believe this level of play translates to an LSU win. This is not a criticism of the brand of football they'd prefer to watch. What they're saying is they don't think this much defense, this little offense is a recipe for beating a team like LSU, which apparently our audience views as a legitimate national championship contender. So, to be fair, that's what people are saying.
We've talked about this before, Brandon. I mean, I think the ideal ball game is Georgia needs to keep LSU in the 30s. Georgia needs to keep LSU in the 20s and find a way to get 28 points. I mean, that's not rocket science, but you got to sit there and go, how does this team get to 28 points? Is it a pick six? Is it a play in the kicking game? Is it a return? Something like that. I mean, we've seen so much data where it's another carbon copy Xerox game. It's not much different than Notre Dame. It's not much different than Auburn. It's not much different than Texas A&M. I mean, it's not much different than Florida. Georgia just stays within 10 points of everyone.
So LSU is a 43.5-point favorite over Arkansas today. Arkansas trailing 7-0, just under 5 minutes to go in the second quarter, is inside the LSU 10. So you think LSU fans are like, boy, we're gonna roll right over Georgia. We're gonna steamroll Georgia and just step on their throat on the way to the SEC championship. Right now, they're trying to keep Arkansas off the scoreboard as 43.5-point favorite. So listen, nobody's perfect. I mean, Georgia's imperfections may seem more glaring than others, and they may indeed be. But LSU fans aren't exactly living a charmed life right now. They're trying to keep Arkansas off the scoreboard right now. Jethro Smith says the great defense is being wasted. But, Jethro, here's where my semantic impression of this is just different than yours is. I don't think the great defense is being wasted. You know, I found myself tonight, you know how, sometimes you have to get up and go to the bathroom or something like that? And I guess in a typical football situation, you kind of make sure you see your team driving the ball, but once they either score or punt or whatever, then you hop and go to the bathroom. For me, this year at Sanford Stadium, that's not been the case. For me, I've made sure I've been in my seat. I'm not going to get a drink. I'm not going to the bathroom. I'm watching the defense every time they're doing their thing, because this year for the Georgia home games, that's where the show has been. So the idea that Georgia's wasting a great defense, they're not wasting it on me, because I've enjoyed watching every snap of it. I've been entertained by it. And in a night like tonight where, Georgia got a 10th regular season win, looks to get an 11th on Saturday, I don't think they're wasting it all. I think they're being propelled by it. I think they're being led by it. I think some of you are wasting your opportunity. I'm not saying you're doing this, Jethro, but I think some of you are wasting your opportunity to enjoy it. But in terms of Georgia wasting it, I don't think they're wasting it all. I think they're being propelled by it. Now, I'm also not going to buy what I think of as BS, that somehow the way that Georgia runs its offense makes things easier on its defense, and they're doing the things they're doing to make things better on the defense. I think that's, frankly, a grift. I don't think that's true at all. But the Georgia defense is certainly worth appreciating right now. Jeff, let me get a couple more comments here. Jermaine Jones says, you know who is not entertained? DeAndre Swift. And that's probably fair. There was the moment captured on TV near the end of the game where Swift showed some intense displeasure, and it seemed to be directed towards Jake Fromm. And listen, Jeff, as I said before you got here, I'm not scandalized by this. Competitors are intense, and sometimes that intensity comes at the expense of one of your opponents, and sometimes that intensity kind of blows up at the expense of one of your teammates. That's just the way it happens. You yell at each other and you move on.
Yeah, I don't know. It looked like there was an alignment issue there where maybe Swift was lined up on the wrong side of the formation. But I tell you what, as agitated as DeAndre got, man, it seemed like it turbo boosted his gas tank for a lot of closing plays right there. And I mean, that's just the Georgia offense this year. I mean, we keep talking about it. We keep saying about it. One thing we see today is, how will Georgia deal with a dual threat quarterback, a guy with wheels? I mean, everybody's going to point out that, the 4 field goals today, it's no secret. That's the way we kind of always seen Rodrigo do this all year. It's like Brandon's in one of his shows, he's going to say something about the Gators. There might be an Eddie the Blind Squirrel reference. There might be, around the SEC. I mean, these are the staples of this Georgia football team. And here's what's happening. It's gotten them to Atlanta. They're going to play LSU for the SEC championship. And, again, I think you say this a lot, Brandon. If anybody can run the football on the Georgia Bulldogs, they should try, because no one has. Yeah. 20 carries, 1 yard. That includes a dual threat quarterback today, and that's a great play caller over on the other sidelines. That's Jimbo Fisher. It seems like when Georgia gets in man and they're going to come after you, they just suffocate everybody offensively. And it's the boys always say in the locker room, we're so close. They're so close. If Georgia can put it all together, what it will be. I mean, this might be Georgia putting it all together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the frustration that some of our audience is going to share, maybe even some of the people who are watching us at the UGA bookstore right now, is the notion of we're so close, we're a couple of inches away. Those words fall on deaf ears now. I mean, that was a hopeful tone to strike a couple of weeks ago. As of now, it's pretty obvious that's just not the case.
Just always something like we asked Jake today. We said, Jake, what's the big cleanup on aisle 9 for the offense? There's a lot of things. There's a procedure penalty where Georgia turns a 1st and 10 into a 1st and 25. There's a false start, or there's somebody waiting too long, or somebody running the wrong way on a route. It's always something. And, Jake, we asked him, Jake, what's the predominant narrative for the offense? The overwhelming underlying hiccup all the time. And it says on first down. They just have to be more productive on first down. They have to get more on first down, so where they're not always playing behind the chains. I mean, there's a stat I wrote about this week, Brandon. I know everybody talks about the receivers, but Georgia's top 5 receivers from last year are gone. They brought 5 guys back who caught at least 5 passes last year. Those guys are averaging 1 catch per game. Georgia's top 3 receivers this year weren't even on the team a year ago. And that's fine. That's a triage moment. That's why that's happening from month 1, month 2.
That feels like a September excuse, not a November.
It's just they're just never always together. They're never always on the same page. I mean, you get Demetrius Robertson today with a jet sweep. You see Georgia now tossing the ball outside. Did you see those shotgun tosses where Harrion closes out a game and everything else like that? Or he extends that 2-minute drive. I mean, Brandon, you got to look for something from this offense. And I thought the way Georgia closed out the game today, that was at least a gain for this offense, and not saying, okay, defense, do it again, because the defense has had to shut down and put a ribbon on a lot of these wins so far this season.
So it's our Pella Window post-game show. We're live here at the UGA Bookstore. We got a lot more of your comments coming. I'll get some of those on YouTube. Let me remind you, though, that our friends at Pella Window and Door make it all possible. Energy-efficient windows and doors. Great offer for you right now. You get 40% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for the next 48 months. That's valid through January 9th, so take advantage of this right now. PellaSoutheast.us, the website. That's PellaSoutheast.us. Or give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom, 404-445-2979. 404-445-2979. All right, so let's mention a name by name. We haven't probably talked about as much as we should, just given the fact that he is the number one topic in the comment section right now. What do you make of Jake Fromm tonight, Jeff? To my eyes, it just seems like he's less accurate than he used to be. And tonight it's raining again. There's the glove, then there's not glove, and the whatever. It just seems like there were moments tonight where there were open receivers, and Fromm just missed them. And Fromm is a guy that I think of as being able to throw it through a mason jar. I mean, just, over the last 2 years, his freshman season in 2017, sophomore season in 2018, I would dare say he was the most accurate passer that I saw in all of college football, to be honest with you. And this year, even with open receivers at times, he's just not quite as accurate as he once was. Overthrowing Pickens tonight on the flea flicker. You know, you can sort of cite other examples. What do you think is going on with Jake Fromm? Is it weather again tonight? I mean, what is the deal with Fromm?
Yeah, so, I mean, have you gotten into the glove story tonight?
We haven't done the glove talk a ton yet.
So that was the, excuse me, guys, that was the predominant narrative of like one of the, maybe took up a couple minutes of Jake Fromm's post-game media thoughts. So they tried after the Kentucky game to do something about a wet ball and how they would handle a wet ball. And Jake went with a black, it's like a receiver glove. It's tackified. It's a Newman's receiver glove. Am I allowed to mention a sporting goods apparel receiver?
That's fine. That's fine.
I know Brandon's corollaries here, but like, so he had it on, and then he had it off, and then it started raining again. He put it back on, and then it stopped raining, and he took it off. As if Georgia needed any more yin and yang and up and down to its offense. And he'd never worn a glove before at any point of his high school career, college career. That was an adjustment for him. I think the main thing is I just see there's a lot of times you see it tonight with James Cook. You can see the South Carolina game with DeAndre Swift. Seems like his eyes are more downfield, and he's just missing that easy check down a lot to the back. And that's just what a lot of Georgia fans want to see, just check the ball down.
So, Trent McGinnis says it's confidence, BA. It's been a very interesting year for Fromm there in that regard. When you think back to the Tennessee game where he said post-game that he was told by people close to him before the game to make sure he goes out and enjoys himself. That's not the kind of thing you typically tell someone unless you think they're not enjoying themselves prior to that. Has Fromm just lost his confidence? Is this a less confident quarterback than he used to be? Because from a body language standpoint, sometimes that looks to be the case. But admittedly, sometimes body language can be misleading when he is the leader of an offense that's struggling overall. Maybe you wouldn't expect him to have great body language. Do you think that Fromm has lost his confidence?
I think it's more a quarterback's confidence. What's the derivative there, Brandon? It's the receiver group. It's the fact that I'm going to put the ball out there and somebody's going to make a play. Remember what he did with Javon Wims? Somebody asked him tonight, what's his big memory of going to go play Georgia Tech? The first thing that came to Fromm's mind, very fluid, was I threw a nice ball to Javon Wims and he went and got it. I mean, you wonder where a quarterback's confidence comes from, and that's the playmakers around him. I mean, Jake Fromm's not a dual-threat quarterback. He's not going to move the chains with his legs, and I think it seems like there's always something that keeps Fromm, keeps this offense, that keeps it handcuffed in 2019.
But can we agree, though, that you may be able to point to the South Carolina game or portions of the Auburn game where there was no one for Fromm to throw to. I think a rewatch of this game is going to show open receivers all over the place. So the idea that Fromm's struggles are solely the cause of receivers tonight, I don't know that a rewatch of the game film is necessarily going to bring that to the discussion.
Yeah, I don't think it's I think it's the ability, like he said so much this year that the 50-50 ball with Pickens feels like a 70-30 ball because he can go up and get a ball. And, I mean, he feeds Dominic Blaylock over the middle there, gets the chains almost moved late. I mean, you just don't see, even like what were some of, the best, most, brilliant exclamation point plays of Fromm's career? The flea flicker. That's a great confidence play. He's made that shot a couple of times against team, against Florida, against Dan Mullen in Mississippi State. I mean, it just seems like whatever it is, this was a struggle game for Fromm. 11 out of 23. I mean, there's a point where you want to say Jake is not playing his best football, spinning the ball around. I mean, I'm not going to put a breaking on that for all of our Dog Nation readers, but somehow this team finds a way to win without it. It leans on its run game, which is the fundamental DNA of the Georgia offense. And, I mean, it's not like Georgia has an alternative, Brandon, because, I mean, a lot of the things, who was the other – if Fromm is struggling, what's the next move?
Yeah, and I don't think that, certainly for me, whatever I've seen from Fromm hasn't made me think about Stetson Bennett one time. It hasn't. Did I expect more out of Fromm during his junior year? Admittedly, I guess I probably expected more from him than this. I'll be happy to say that. I thought that Fromm would have a better season than right now that he's having. I'll be completely honest about that. However, what I'm not going to do, though, is say, well, the rest, and I'm speaking as a fan here. I got my Georgia SEC East Championship T-shirt from the UGA bookstore. I'm proud of this thing. I'm proud of having won the division for a third straight year. So what I'm about to say, I'm saying as a fan, not an analyst. I am not going to let Fromm's struggles keep me from enjoying the rest of the season. And if Georgia ends up not winning the SEC, which at the very least is what would have to happen to call this a successful season. And if Fromm continues to play this way, then at that point in time, then we will call it as it is. The Georgia offense with veteran leadership at the quarterback position ended up just not being the way that it was supposed to be, and it just kind of sputtered out here in Fromm's junior year. We will call it as it is. But for now, my choice as a fan is to just sort of let it play out and find out what the real take is after the game is played. And somebody like Dawg1968 on YouTube a moment ago said, B.A., that's my name, B.A., he said, B.A., your take on this is weird. I really don't think my take on this is all that weird. Y'all have read the stuff that I've written at DawgNation.com. You heard the stuff that I said at DawgNation Daily. Obviously, I share some of your same concerns about the offense and some of the people who've contributed, to those issues offensively. We're on the same page on this. But I'm just going to try to enjoy the games for now and then see if the concerns ended up being the real thing that undid Georgia, or if they just sort of find a way to play better when it matters. I mean, luck exists in football, and there's a chance you could have some good luck on your side, but you got to be in the game to enjoy it, and Georgia gets a chance to play in that game coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm be honest with folks. I'm always honest with Brandon. This feels like we're talking about a defeat. It really does. It feels like we're talking about a defeat. And I mean, when you know going into it that something's going to happen, I guess you're not disappointed, or you're not thinking that, if DeAndre Swift was averaging 225 yards rushing per game and he ends up with 105, that's a disappointment. But this is just the Georgia football team we've seen all along, all this year. And again, you asked me a second ago, what's the difference in Fromm? I'm allowed to have this opinion. I think the overall production fear factor of his receivers does not lead him to be the quarterback he used to be. Because I'm just looking at what's different in this equation. What's different from 2017, 2018. Georgia just doesn't have the playmakers with all the turnover on its offense.
So let me say two things about that. If the one-sentence description of this is Fromm's not having a good season because his receivers aren't good, then I think for a lot of our audience, that's not going to be giving enough responsibility to the quarterback. I mean, I'm going to, since the commenters can't speak out loud, they can only write. I'm telling you right now, that's what they're going to put on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, that you can't put Fromm's, what I would think of as surprisingly unproductive season, you can't put that solely on the receivers. That's not giving him enough responsibility for all of it.
Well, I mean, it's the whole offense, Brandon. I mean, the offensive line, as great a push as they're supposed to get, I mean, it's supposed to roll this team to a lot more 5-6 yard carries, 5.5 yard, 6 yard carries per game. I mean, is there any level of this offensive? It's Jake Fromm not playing his best football.
Hold on. Let me stop you one. I don't want me to cut you off, but I want to stop you on one thing though. The Georgia offensive line, statistically speaking, is doing fantastic. They are still top 10 in the country in line yards from Football Outsiders. They're still top 10 in the country in overall sack rate allowed. The Georgia offensive line is doing its job this year. That should be abundantly clear. The Georgia offensive line is getting its job done.
Well, I mean, I'm going to disagree. There's 4 or 5 future NFL players on that offensive line, and they're not facing 4 or 5 future NFL players on defensive lines by and large through the SEC. I mean, it's becoming a finger-pointing game. Do we want to pin the tail on the problems here with the offense and everything else?
But
I don't understand.
But hold on. Let me try to help make you understand. It seems to some people that you are finger-pointing. You're just finger-pointing towards the wide receivers. And for some people, that's not going to be a satisfactory answer.
Well, I mean, my satisfactory answer is, from watching football a long time, Brandon, you know what makes a confident quarterback? It's playmakers at receiver. It's guys going up and getting balls. It's guys lining up, beating their man, and making a play. Like, there's just flashes with this football team. And yes, Fromm is not accurate as he should be. I mean, do I need to say 7 things I see wrong about everybody so the audience feels like it's a real take out there? I mean, I just don't see that this Fromm and this entire package on offense is any different than what we've seen all year. And, I mean, are they going to get 5% better? Are they going to find a little bit more? I mean, I think the thing a lot of folks might just have to eventually get with, if there's ever a rainbow at the end of this season, what if Georgia just wins every football game like this? Because if they do extend their season, they will have to win every football game like this.
But that's a straw man argument, because what you're seeing from the audience is not unhappy with the way Georgia's winning. As I said before, they're making and I think these are faulty predictions because I think they should let it play out, but they're making predictions about what will happen. No one's going to complain if Georgia beats LSU 19-13. They're simply saying that against a more stout opponent, that's just less likely to occur.
Look right there, Brandon. 7-3. Everybody has, and Georgia's like, what does LSU have besides the overpowering offense?
No, you're saying what I've already said, but let's not obscure the point. Let me get some more comments here on Facebook here for a moment. Mike Gay says they're better with Cager in the game, and there's no doubt Cager's injury continues to be a problem for Georgia. A different offense when he's in there, to be sure. Jason Glossier said a little earlier that he hasn't seen a receiver stretch out for a ball and dive for it yet. That's not fair because George Pickens went horizontal trying to catch that flea flicker here today. He was parallel to the ground trying to catch that. So, Jason, on that particular moment, that's not fair.
Well, let's go to that one point. And it's like, Brandon, how many big plays did Lawrence Cager make today?
Yeah, none.
When Lawrence Cager is not a playmaker in this Georgia offense, a pedestrian, still trying to find more points group becomes even less of what it is. I mean, that's Georgia's leading receiver. When Georgia's leading receiver is not out there making plays for the offense, then it reduces the efficiency, the big play potential. Defenses can scheme Georgia differently. I mean, let's look. Is there a common thread here? That's the way you want to look at it. What's the common thread? When Georgia is fizzling the most offensively this season, and there have been a lot of fizzles, what's the common thread, Brandon? Cager's not in the game.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. You never would have thought at the beginning of the year that this was an offense that had to have Cager on the field, but for the most part, that's been the case thus far this year. A couple people, including, who was it a little earlier? Kelly Chitwood, I know, mentioned this, and Kelly Dial mentioned this as well. The situation with the play calling. You know, obviously, after any game, play calling is getting a lot of attention. I don't know that I had a problem with any kind of play calling tonight. I mean, I thought they were trying to be creative. You know, as you mentioned before, some of the old Jalen Hurts Alabama passes where, it's kind of like a glorified jet sweep. The flea flicker I thought was creative when they tried to use it. You saw I've been calling for Swift to get more balls thrown his way. Tonight that was the case. In terms of total number of receptions, he was Georgia's leading receiver tonight. So I actually have no beef with the play calling. Obviously the execution leaves something to be desired, but maybe I'll go back and rewatch it and feel differently. I didn't see, and of course they run balls on second down every single time, but I didn't see a huge problem with the play calling tonight.
Yeah, I mean, to me it seems like James Coley is dialing up some things. I think even Mr. Danielson even complimented James Coley on his play calling and what's going on with Georgia's offense right now. I mean, the narrative of this season. I mean, it's funny. Like, I think one of our strengths and what we should do with these post-game shows is kind of get our arms around everything. And the dominant narrative, and I guess that's what we're going to talk about, what you guys want to talk about. But, I mean, a player like Tyler Clark has played his last game inside Sanford Stadium. 2 huge plays tonight that put Texas A&M behind the chains. You continue to see Georgia defensively. I mean, the offensive guys get it. Like DeAndre Swift said after the game that, he's a little ticked. He's a little mad because the defense has to come out and keep getting stops, 4th and 1s. 3rd and 1s, changing them over, forcing 3rd downs, getting the offenses off the field. And he feels as an offense, they've got to take advantage of that. They got to capitalize on that. I mean, you got Blankenship hitting 4 field goals. I mean, it reminds me of the way that, the old school football teams. And I don't know whether this is the evolution of the Georgia program where they want to play clean football because they feel they have the decided upper hand in players. That's one thing that you want to think back to last year when they faced the SEC championship foe in Alabama. You saw a different Georgia team in that game come out swinging. What does it look like when this football team comes out swinging? It better have a healthy Lawrence Cager out there, and look forward to next week. Look forward to Georgia Tech. I think most of the folks on our comment section, if I can read them correctly, they're going to think, well, Georgia better put up 45 points against Georgia Tech and blow the doors off that rivalry. Don't take this the wrong way, folks, but I don't even know if Georgia's capable of that 45 to 55 point game the way they're currently constructed. Sure, I think they'll beat Georgia Tech handily, but handily 35, 40, 45 point numbers. That's a lot of points for this offense to put up.
Let me get a few comments here. Charles Hall asking about Eric Stokes. So I know Stokes' absence was kind of an oddity for a lot of folks in the stands. So Connor Riley told us that, he told me this anyway, that Stokes leaves the game just before the half, and I don't believe he played at all in the second half. I don't think I ever saw him. Did we ever figure out what was wrong with Stokes? All right, so Smart was asked about Stokes' situation and had really nothing to offer, and so you really – it's another situation where, Georgia's been thin with its secondary this year. I thought that DJ Daniels stepped up, made some plays. Again tonight, this is a secondary that hasn't had its expected starters at cornerback in a long time, and they've kind of found a way to, to kind of put that together. Michael Corson wants to talk about some recruiting stuff. We'll kind of get into that, including the Noah Sewell thing here coming up a little bit later on. Let me get a few more. Let me go back over to Facebook here for a moment.
Can I, while you're searching, one of the things, you wonder about this, what do you think? Did Georgia's defense find a way to play even better this week? Was this one of their better defensive performances? I mean, it seems like every week, football teams, with their coaches, their mantra is just get a little bit better every practice, just get a little bit better every game. It seems like this defense still has a few more elevators up to the top. The way, DJ Daniel played today. I mentioned Tyler Clark earlier. Jordan Davis with the big stuff on a short yardage play as well. Monty Rice, Nakobe Dean. It seems like, Richard LeCount is around the ball all the time with that. I mean, it's almost like Richard LeCount needs another set of shoulder pads for just him with his shoulder spikes every week.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go back and look at what A&M had been doing as of late, getting a 24-17 win against Ole Miss, scored 49 on the road at Mississippi State to win 49-30. We won't even count Texas San Antonio beat South Carolina last week 30-6. Georgia holds them to 13 tonight. Not only do I think the defense is doing its job and played, as you said, one of its best games of the season tonight, I think it's really fun to watch. I love the way this team just is unyielding. And obviously a lot of that kind of showed up tonight in terms of the rush defense. You mentioned Tyler Clark continuing to make plays. Richard LeCount is really going to, I think, be able to say that he's played not just a collection of good games, but really a stellar season for him in his junior campaign. This defense for me is a lot of fun to watch, and as disappointed as I am about, and this kind of goes back to the topic we had to start the show, as disappointed as I am about what the Georgia offense isn't, I don't want that to keep me from enjoying what the Georgia defense is. And that's not an excuse making for the offense. I'll tell you right now, it ought to be better. But I'm going to choose to enjoy what is good about Georgia right now. And I do truly believe that gives Georgia a chance to win the SEC championships. Our buddy Bob Tharp here from Meriwether and Tharp enjoying the game here tonight. Good to see him in the building. And as Jeff said, it's now 7-6 between LSU and Arkansas. I ain't a bit scared of that team, and I use bad grammar intentionally. I'm not the least bit scared of LSU, even given the way that Georgia played tonight. I can't guarantee Georgia's going to win, but none of y'all who are really, really disappointed, you can't guarantee Georgia's going to lose either.
Yeah, I mean, you keep, and here's something, Brandon. I mean, did we ever think we would say this through 11 games, that Richard LeCount might be playing every bit as well as J.R. Reed on the back end right now? And folks, that's not a slight to J.R. Reed at all. I mean,
J.R. Reed's in it unless he's
he was a Nagurski finalist, one of the top defensive players in the country. But there's a lot of – I'm going to take you to a play. And, we're on the sidelines watching, and there's a play, Brandon, and I put this in the forum chat tonight where Michael Barnett comes up and makes a play, and he has a tip ball. And normally that's an awesome, amazing thing. But J.R. Reed had bird dogged that route. And if that ball would have went where it was supposed to go, J.R. Reed would have been there, and then he would have got on his pogo stick and he would have scored a touchdown. It's just those safeties, those back ends clean up everything. I mean, there are a lot of plays where, the way Richard LeCount sniffed out another turnover, and when Georgia really needed it, again, offense didn't really do a whole lot with those points. But you just see that defense. Man, maybe this is blustery, maybe this is too much of a pro-Georgia comment, but that's going to be a football game with that LSU football team. And that's going to be a four-quarter tight football game because Georgia and its defense will not slump. It will not have an off night, and it will pressure and suffocate the dickens out of those receivers.
Robert Hosea says I sound complacent, but here's the thing, though, Robert. You've seen me after losses before, whether it be, South Carolina game this year or obviously, the Alabama stuff, from the last couple of years. I don't have the luxury of logging off after a loss. I have to stare into this camera and talk into that camera with this microphone every single time. Trust me, there's nobody who, as a fan now, not as an analyst, but as a fan, there's no one who hungers to see Georgia get over the top more so than I do. And there'll be no one who'll be more, broken about that than I will. And to make matters worse, I'll have to be talking on this camera right after the game's over with. Trust me, that is a show I do not want to do. There's no complacency for me on this. All I'm saying is I'm just not nearly as sure that this is going to end in a doom as some of y'all are. I'm not in any way. I mean, as I said before, LSU's not a perfect team right now. Georgia imperfect there as well. Luckily, it doesn't take perfect to get it done. Kevin Drummer says the offense isn't going to get better. You can give up that pipe dream. No, you understand something. Me saying Georgia may win, at this point in time, I have given up the pipe dream. I mean, recently, it's 2 weeks ago, I did write, hey, maybe there's a chance that Georgia plays better down the stretch, and by doing so could work their way up to being the worst offense to ever win a national championship in the college football playoff era. At this point in time, I've even given up on that. If Georgia wins it all this year, the basement for how good of an offense it takes to win a national championship is going to go several floors lower. So I've sort of given up on all of that. At this point in time, I'm just kind of ready to kind of see how it plays out and kind of see where it goes. But there's really nothing else you can do.
Yeah, let's make sure we get a matter of record here for our post-game show. And I know a lot of times in the past we used to put stats up, but Swift finishes with 19 carries for 103 yards. Had a lot more than that, but he lost 8 yards on the first snap of the game. Georgia gave Texas A&M 62 plays, Brandon. They netted 274 total yards. LeCount led the way with 7 tackles. Rodrigo with 4 field goals tonight, as well as an extra point, his 190th straight extra point. Passes Blair Walsh for the all-time leading scorer in Georgia history. We were talking to Rodrigo after the game, and he thought it was a perfect ending. He couldn't have dreamed out a better way to end his career in Sanford Stadium by being there for his team and coming up with 4 field goals and being a difference in a win.
That's really well said. Let me ask you this, Jeff, because a lot of folks want to talk about recruiting. We'll get back to the game stuff here in a moment. We'll kind of honor the UGA seniors here, too. Really good video of that. Hopefully you've been able to see that already tonight. We'll try to show some more of that. I'm sorry about my hat head. When it's raining, I have to try to keep the hat on. And then I decided to go not hat for the post-game show, but I'm looking at myself on camera. And, boy, I look pretty hat-heady right now. So
Is that a term?
it is for me now. So let's do 2 things here for a moment. To get people,
recruiting to talk about, by the way.
yeah, to get people in a real good mood. Before we get to what was going on today, what happened with Noah Sewell?
Well, it's funny. A lot of the chatter that's came out about that decision was Noah found he grew to a lot of more confidence in Oregon's defense. The way that they practice, the way they play up front, the new schemes, and the way they just came together this year as a season under a new coordinator. He felt confidence in that. And, that was one of those where Georgia was right in the thick of it when maybe they shouldn't have been right in the thick of it. I mean, that's going out to Utah, pulling a Polynesian player where Georgia doesn't have any Polynesians on its roster currently right now of that same heritage, and his older brother is there at Oregon as well. And I think Georgia I think Georgia made that quite a contest. And, lots of people were like, hey, Jeff, what's, Noah? I mean, he was up on that top targets list for a reason, because that's simply, I think, one of the very best football players Georgia can sign this year, that, hey, they had a decent, legitimate, strong shot to reel in. He just decided to go with the familiar and the comfortable and what was known to him rather than the University of Georgia.
So Oregon has been in everybody's top 5 since Chip Kelly's been there. But Oregon also, really, for the most part, never really won with any of those guys. With Cristobal there now, they're winning with some of these guys now. Thibodeau a year ago, Sewell now. We'll wait and see what happens with Ringo, although I guess I probably still feel pretty good about Georgia in that one. But the days of Oregon being the silver medalist for a lot of these guys who like the flashy uniforms, that's not the case. Now, having Panay on the team really helped with Noah Sewell, but Oregon's a real threat on the recruiting trail to be more than just the dream official visit, the place you want to go and get some free Nike gear. Oregon with Cristobal, way more so than really any coach they've had in quite some time, maybe ever, is just a real factor to win some of these recruiting battles.
Well, I mean, number one, he's a great recruiter, and he's cut out of the Saban cloth. But, I mean, Brandon, the thing with Oregon that strikes my mind, Brandon, is that a destination job? Does Cristobal stay there for 10 years with great seasons and great recruiting, or does he elevate his profession and go grab another another perch like a Texas or another job that might come open eventually like a USC or something like that.
If you're the number one spot for every kid west, I mean when I say west of Mississippi, I'm exaggerating, but right now USC's not a recruiting power. UCLA's down as a recruiter. Right now they are probably the name brand recruiter on the West Coast right now. I'm obviously speaking in broad generalities, but as far as the Pac-12 lane goes, they're out recruiting, I think, that conference at the moment. So could that keep Cristobal around for a little bit longer? And for Georgia, who wants to be a national recruiting power, could there be more head-to-head battles with Oregon? And could Georgia be at the risk of losing some of those, especially when it's a geographic issue? My prediction is yes.
Well, I mean, Georgia is now in that way out, extended pass, friendly confines in the SEC footprint. They're way out there trying to pull in a lot of these California guys. And, hey, they got a Kendall Milton. Hey, things are looking really good with that Nevada tight end who showed up today. And, I mean, Brandon, one of the things, if folks want to talk recruiting, I'm just going to say this. I think that this low-key, especially when you count the 2021 players that were here today, Brandon, there were a bunch of them. I've got a lot of pictures already up in the Dog Nation forum. This was rivaling what Georgia brought to bear with the Notre Dame game as far as a visitor list goes. I mean, let's talk about Darnell Washington to begin with. Brandon, he shows up kind of on the sly.
Okay, good.
Unofficial visit. That means he took an unofficial visit this weekend when he still had official visits left on the table to go check out Georgia in its last home game and did so on his own dime.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Go get rained on. And, here's maybe some better thoughts from this Georgia football game tonight is you look on the right side of the bleachers of the West End Zone, Brandon. You see Nazir Stackhouse. You see Darnell Washington. You see Carson Beck. You see Warren Brinson. You see all those guys just kind of globbed in together there. And that could potentially be one of the cores of the 2020 class. The other gentleman you saw there is you saw Amarius Mims, the 5-star tackle from 2021. He was there. C.J. Stroud was there. He made his official visit this weekend to Athens, not the unofficial visit that folks were thinking he was going to go. So they get an official visit from Stroud. You keep looking around. Georgia got a recent. I don't know how you feel about this. This is the first time I probably ever told you about this, but recent Miami decommit from Northwestern High. What's Northwestern?
Big time program.
That's Devod Wilson's old school, Northwestern. He decommitted from Miami about 4 days ago, Brandon. He's about 5'9". He's about 165, 170. True laser 4.4 speed. He shows up today in Athens on an official visit as well. And, Georgia's shopping for more receivers. And I think maybe the natural question is, hey, guys, Noah Sewell, if he's off the board, who does that bring into the Georgia class and make them much more of a possibility? I think that's going to come on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that's going to come in terms of another defensive back.
James Crum talking about the fact that Arkansas, at least for now, is still struggling with LSU. LSU still struggling with Arkansas as 43.5-point favorites. Kathy Aquavia-Green likes the idea of Darnell Washington, big power tight end. John Benton also mentioning that as well, that a guy like that, the athleticism, the size, could really change things for the Georgia offense. James Crump kind of saying that there as well. How does not getting a 5-star like Sewell, and ultimately, this doesn't matter all that much, but I admit I do like this kind of stuff. How does it impact Georgia's kind of pursuit of like a top 3 type class? Does not getting Sewell, that's a 5-star that would have certainly helped your score there. All of a sudden now, and some of this is impacted by re-ranks, which is, you can sort of, decide how you feel about that. But can Georgia still be a top 3 class?
Yeah, you look at it, and it's another one when Kendall Milton loses his 5-star status, and then Noah Sewell goes to Oregon, then that overall number about how many 5-stars Georgia can sign. And, again, sometimes I want to catch myself and make sure I just say a real point here and not a fantasy recruiting point. But Georgia might need some work to do to get to 4th and 5th 5-stars in this class now. Any other year, any other program, that would be a good thing. But now, who are the potential 5-stars left out there for Georgia? Well, they have a commitment from Broderick Jones. They have a commitment from Mikhail Sherman. Darnell Washington is a major 5-star target. Also out there is Jordan Birch, another major 5-star target. It just looks like, the class, folks, Noah Sewell is a big loss only because I think he's going to be a Butkus Award winner. He's going to be one of the 5 best defensive players in college football. There's no one like him in college football. especially when he drops about 10 pounds of weight and operates at about 250 pounds. That's a great get for Mario Cristobal and the Oregon program. But Georgia did not need an inside linebacker in this class, but they had to pursue with both barrels a guy like Noah Sewell. I mean, that inside linebacker room next season is still going to be as thick and as stout as any inside linebacker room in the country. Same goes for the outside linebacker position as well. Georgia at linebacker is fine. I think the narrative now is Georgia get another wide receiver. Does Georgia go get another safety cornerback type, a nickel cornerback type? I think the name Dante Manning is the one that's going to get a lot more pressure from Georgia going forward.
Winston Mogg says, he says, this post-game show has turned into Before the Hedges because BA doesn't want to hear our negativity. That's not true, Winston. People asked about the recruiting stuff. We got to make sure we give people that. And, by the way, for those of you who want to hear –
I need to add, this is our moment to get all the recruiting stuff in. 5-star all-purpose back. Will Shipley was also in here from North Carolina. He's the nation's #1 all-purpose back. Sat in the front row. He was also here as well. Number 23 overall prospect in the 24/7 Sports composite rankings for the 2021 class. We mentioned Amarius Mims was here. Zacchaeus Walker was here on his official visit. C.J. Stroud was an official visitor. You also got an official visit from Justin Robinson as well.
Can I stop you real quick here? And I promise we'll do some more Georgia, Texas A&M on the way out the door here. The fact that Stroud takes an official as opposed to an unofficial, this may be kind of pseudoscience, but to me it makes it less likely he's coming to Georgia as opposed to taking the unofficial now and then taking another official later on. The fact this is an official instead of an unofficial makes it seem like to me that he was sightseeing. Is that fair or not?
Well, no, I mean, pseudoscience, I'll use your term right there. I mean, now I think he got a good look at Georgia. I think it's going to be Georgia, Ohio State there. That would be who's going to finish second there type of race there. And I mean,
you understand what I'm saying, right?
But let's connect the dots. I don't think, and people can just draw from this comment what I'm going to say here. I don't think C.J. Stroud was coming to Georgia unless Jake Fromm was going to the NFL. I think that was the best way for a C.J. Stroud to see an open competition there with Carson Beck at quarterback for Georgia. Because if he goes to Ohio State, which is, the way things are trending, then he's going to have to sit and watch Justin Fields play football for one season.
Travis McCullough wants to know, did Justin Flo show up? There have been some rumors that he might.
He did not show up. Strong leanings to Clemson. One of those things that we know from covering recruiting as long as we do is when you've made a silent commitment to the Clemson Tigers, they do not allow you to take any other visits. So I would wonder if
so he's silently committed to Clemson?
I would just say the reason why he might never visit Georgia is he has potentially made a silent commitment to Clemson because that's the way that program operates. If you're committed, even if you're silently committed, you don't take your visits. So, again, with Georgia, you got to wonder what can they show a guy like Justin Flo when the priority, in my feeling, in my read on the situation, is the priority for the longest time over the summer has been Noah Sewell at the inside linebacker spot.
So Gabriel Wood says, the Disney Dogs are just glad we made the SEC championship, and that's it. And, of course, a lot of you who are longtime message board posters know that means the people who are, like, overly sunshine and rainbows, overly optimistic. Look, do you call David Pollock a Disney Dog? Because apparently here's what Pollock tweeted. He says, good Lord, Georgia football is insanely good. How dang good is the SEC championship going to be? New school football versus old school football. Now, you may not like being on the old school football side of this, but honestly, I'm kind of with Pollock on this. I have no idea if Georgia's going to win this game. But the idea that I expect it to be a good game, Pollock says insanely good, insanely fun to watch, that's kind of the way that I think. And I'm not going to participate in an emotional hedge. And don't fool yourself. That's what all this stuff is, the idea of, well, Georgia's not good enough to beat LSU. All that is an emotional hedge to try to make yourself not feel so quite so bad if it doesn't work out. Folks, I've been doing this fandom thing for 40-plus years. I'm telling you right now, this kind of stuff doesn't work. I am all in on this Georgia-LSU game. I am going to lead with my chin and be really, really disappointed if it ends up being the 13th game, just like the other 12 have been. But to quote, what was it, Richard Gere in Officer and a Gentleman, I got nowhere else to go. This is all I got, right? I mean, I'm ready to sort of just see how it all plays out. Clean old-fashioned hate next week, SEC championship beyond that. Kirby Smart tonight says there's no doubt Georgia's got to get better, no bones about it. He's got to say that. He's the coach. I wish that kind of improvement was possible. I don't believe it is. I think at this point in time, you got to roll up your sleeves and just sort of do what you can. We've seen 86-win teams win the World Series. We've seen, Eli Manning win 2 Super Bowls. I mean, stranger things have happened in sports. You just got to dance with the girl that brung you and just sort of see where it goes to mix like every metaphor into one.
You got any more there you can put on there? No. You got a Michael Jackson Thriller reference you can get in there as well? I mean, folks, this is just Georgia football. Embrace it. Watch it. The stingiest defense that Georgia has had in some time. And then an offense that flickers and has a big pay players that frustrate a fan base because they expect a lot more. They want a lot more. They should get a lot more out of this offense. I mean, the thing is, Georgia's margin of victory or how they win bigger games in December is they find a way to make 1 or 2 more plays offensively, and they find a way to stop kicking field goals in the red zone against a very good opponent. I don't think, shocker here, I don't think Georgia's a 45-point exploding offense in these big games. I would consider myself shocked because that would be running against the grain and counter to everything we've seen so far with this 2019 season. What we see here is what we are. The point I want to come back to is that it's just like you were asking me a direct question. What's up with the quarterback? What's up with number 11? I just don't think he's playing confident because he can, even when he's struggling with his accuracy, even when he's struggling with his rain, he can go up and put up a ball and a guy can make a play for him. The derivative I'm looking for there is that sort of thing builds confidence in a quarterback.
Some of these comments I can't even read. I have no idea how long we've been on the air. I forgot to set my clock. I feel like we've got to been on for a while now, though. YouTube says 70 minutes. Does that sound about right? Okay. So let me. All right, yeah, come on over here, Connor. We'll see if we can squeeze you in. Not time-wise, but into the screen. I have no idea if you're going to fit in the screen or not. Let's slide it. All right. Y'all Connor wants to pop over here. While he's settling in, Jethro Smith says, do you worry about the defense getting tired? Yeah, I do a little bit. I think maybe that happened tonight against Jimbo Fisher. He obviously likes the clock control stuff. I think it's also just really, really hard to keep somebody off the board for 60 full minutes. I think that when your offense puts you behind the 8 ball as much as Georgia's does, then the defense has to play with like 0 margin for error. Yeah, Jethro, I do. That's obviously a little bit of a concern. But to this point in time, the depth, the fact they can play almost in a completely different 11 on 3rd down than the 1st and 2nd down gives them a chance to mitigate some of that there as well. Connor Riley joins us.
So I've gotten a lot of questions, seen a lot of comments about the dust-up between DeAndre Swift and Jake Fromm at the end of the game. I was on the final offensive drive. I can tell you, standing about 30 yards from them, DeAndre very passionately was talking to Jake Fromm there, and Kirby said post-game, they sort of ran the play into an obvious pressure, and when you're trying to run clock there, you can't really change the play because, that's just sort of, you've already predetermined that's what you're going to do. But I think, there's a good example here for anyone worried about the tension around this team. It's Thanksgiving this week. I don't know if people have talked about this enough because we're all moving on to Christmas already. But at Thanksgiving, you tend to have intense discussions with your family members. But at the end of the day, you still love them and you still want the best for them. I don't think it's a sign of a bigger looming issue. I just think, it's the intensity of the game. It was a high-pressure spot there. They needed 2 first downs to win the game, and you sort of I don't want to say waste, but waste a play like that, you have I think DeAndre has a right to get frustrated. To DeAndre's and Jake's credit, they came back and made the plays they need to. Jake hit Don Blaylock on a big slant pass there. Boy, I'd like to see that a lot more. And then, DeAndre sort of ices the game away like he's capable of doing.
Yeah, I said this before you came in, that I used this word intentionally. I'm not scandalized by this. The idea that we're shrinking violets and that Jake Fromm can't handle DeAndre Swift yelling at him a little bit. This is football. I mean, what do you think goes on during practice? The idea that Kirby Smart let a bad word slip last week during the post-game press conference. Well, I don't necessarily condone bad language in professional settings. This is football. This is just the kind of thing, that goes on. And you better believe that these two, when I think of as grown men, certainly from, physical standpoint, they definitely are. The idea that they're somehow going to be all up in their feelings about this, I don't believe either one is going to be. And good for DeAndre Swift for being a leader.
Yeah, and we talked to DeAndre again post-game. He's saying a lot of the same things, people out there are saying. Yes, and Jake Fromm is too. They're frustrated with how things are going right now. They know they have to play better. But for everyone, and I don't even want to look or know about the comments out there right now.
Not good.
All I would ask is that end of that game there. They needed 2 first downs to salt the game away. Yeah. That's a big spot against and when they hadn't been playing well, 4:35 to go, they run a 4-minute offense there to perfection. Yeah. Yes, they had the one bad play, but other than that, they did everything you could possibly ask for, and they salted the game away there. I do think that says a lot about this offense. When it absolutely needs to, it makes just enough plays.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good thing to say overall.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that, Connor hit on that. I hit on that earlier. It's like you want to look for growth, and if you want to coach and build from a positive, to me, how they were able to not hand that ball back to the defense and say, you got us, guys. I mean, that's something that the way this Georgia offense has gone a lot of years, a lot of games. Notre Dame game was like that. They had to hand the ball back to the defense. That was a little bit of something there from the offense, the way they could close it out. And look who got a lot of those big 3rd and 1, 2nd and 1 yard plays. An effort play by Brian Harrion right there, who stretched out and turned to 3rd and 1 and kept sustaining a drive. I mean, that's something right there. There's a lot of warts today, guys. And I mean, like I said earlier, I kind of feel like we're trying to play pin the tail on all the problems. That's one of those things right there, where Georgia's offense hasn't shown the capacity to do that time and time again against a really good opponent.
Leon O'Neal brought up by Tom Lavelle. I'm glad he brings this up. He was all over the place today, and sometimes for the good reasons, sometimes for not the good reasons. Listen, at this point in time, the cat's out of the bag. Georgia fakes injuries too. Everybody does. But you got to fake them better than this. You got to do better than that if you're Leon O'Neal. And I know that he had some head-on collisions with Swift today. Like I said, he was kind of always seemingly in the TV screen for both the right and the wrong reasons today. Reminds you a lot of the recruiting talks we used to have about that, Jeff.
And O'Neal, I thought he was the best player in A&M's defense. He was around the ball all the time, the sort of things you want to see from a safety. But then, maybe he's the leader of this defense, and when someone has to go down with an injury to sort of, gum up the game, he's the guy to do it.
So, Connor, you were there for the post-game thoughts from Coach Smart. I think there's a lot of people touching on this. I'm getting some messages about it. What did Kirby Smart exactly say about the staff might hate me or the offensive staff might hate me? What was the gist of that?
I think that was in regards to play calling and the sort of way he looks at it, because he was asked specifically about that slant to Blaylock and, calling that there at that point in time because it's a high-risk sort of play, and he sort of brings it up of, well, yeah, if it doesn't work, I look really dumb. And I think from that standpoint and what he was saying there, it was more of a, with the way these games go and sort of the way they're called and the way they're played, yeah, I mean, they're not always easy because of sometimes the decisions that I make. And I think he was sort of taking it upon himself that he is the one that is necessarily making these high-pressure situations or decisions, sort of like the onside kick, things of that nature.
So I think it's kind of weird that you mentioned the onside kick. First of all, I'd give anything up if I could get a wedge to sit on the green the way that Rodrigo got that ball, just to sort of sit down on the ground the way that it did. Do you think anyone's ever tried an onside kick and also punted from the 36-yard line in the same game? I don't think I've ever seen two more disparate levels of risk.
A surprise onside kick. A surprise,
A surprise onside kick in the same game you punted from the 36. Here's a serious question. Do you think any team this year has punted closer than that? Is there a chance that Georgia punted closer to the goal line than any team in college football this year?
I've
seen the 37 this year.
I know Penn State punted pretty close earlier today, a couple times against Ohio State. But
yeah, we've seen some 37s this year. I think Georgia's actually done the 37 at least once, maybe. I know I've seen 37 in a Big Ten game this year. You think anyone's punted from closer than the 36-yard line this year?
You mean Power 5 football? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, Power 5.
Yeah, that's different. I mean, sometimes kickers don't have that leg, or the kickers are battling an injury, or kickers coming back. But is it surprising? Is it surprising?
No, I'm kind of.
I think you see that the 49-yard field goal that Rodrigo made, credit to him for making it, but I don't know necessarily how in that situation you'd feel comfortable about trotting him out there again, just given the way that he sort of kicked it there and sort of the conditions at the time of that decision.
Travis and Winston both talking about the onside kick. Travis McCullough, Winston Mock. Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was well executed. I said this after the Auburn game that, Auburn was upset because their onside kick got taken away. By rule, the onside kick has essentially been legislated out of the game because you just can't do physicality on an onside kick anymore. About the only way you can get one is to do what Georgia did today, which is kick it over the head of the up guys or find a way to kick it straight at somebody so it caroms off of them. So it actually made me feel better, even though Georgia didn't quite come up with it. Wet football probably impacted that maybe a little bit. It made me feel better that if Georgia has to kick one, there's a chance Rodrigo might be able to do that again because, I mean, once again, the wet conditions probably helped this, but he got that ball to stick, to sit down. That was actually – that's a pretty amazing thing.
What can't Rodrigo do? Is there any wonder? I mean, like, he is a master of his craft. I mean, I think one of the things, Brandon, is you're going to see Rodrigo Blankenship at like 19 gazillion award shows in December, the Burlsworth, the Groza. I mean, he's going to be everywhere. Banquets for what he's meant to Georgia football. And, I mean, I thought it was very fitting that the last Bulldog that came out today for Senior Day, when they had all those players coming out, and they had to script that, right, guys?
Well, it's numerical order, but it also works out perfectly that it was Rodrigo at 98.
Yeah, I mean, gosh. And, you know, it's funny. You asked him. I don't even know if it hits him, Brandon, because they're so wired, and we had to play a game. We had to win a game. I thought it was some funny theater at the end of this contest where the players were all hanging out in the middle, and then they were taking pictures together as seniors, and they thought, oh, crap, this is our last one. So they go run into the student section, and they go dive into the hedges. And it's funny because Isaiah Wilson was kind of late to that party. He's not a senior, but the seniors had their moment, and then Isaiah Wilson was like, hey, what about me? So he just goes and does a Christmas angel into the hedges and just sits there and bathes in them for about 5.
I'm going to tell this to Isaiah Wilson on the off chance he happens to be watching right now. Georgia fans want you to come back next year. Now, listen, Georgia fans love the idea of you making money, but Georgia fans don't like the idea of you doing senior night festivities right now. They like the idea of the redshirt sophomore making his way back to Georgia for 2020. Obviously, I'm joking about that. We'll wish Isaiah well no matter what he does there. Brett Barfield on Facebook says, do you think the committee will drop Georgia this week? Emphatically, the answer to that question is no. Georgia's time for needing beauty contest wins, I believe, is over. There are teams in this country who need them. Alabama does. They beat Western Carolina 66-3 because they essentially had to. I think the committee will look at that and yawn. And they'll look at Georgia adding what is a top 25 analytics win. 15th in FPI, top 25 in Football Outsiders FEI, A&M win, which arguably is both Alabama and Clemson's best win right now. So Georgia added that. From a final score standpoint, not as impressive as the Tigers and Tide were, but the point here is there is zero chance that Georgia drops down.
Can we have a realistic conversation for a second? Great running game. Dominant defense. One of the best tailbacks, one of the four best tailbacks in the country.
And I really do think the offensive line's had a much better season you're giving them credit for.
Oh, I just mean, I'm not saying they're a terrible offensive line. I'm just saying that with the struggles they have in the passing game, it just means more for the offensive line here. I mean, DeAndre Swift in these games is getting 105 yards, 110 yards, where, you would like to see him have the 145, the 100. The breakaways are not there. And I think one of the things that, I don't know if it keeps coming up, but the downfield blocking for the receivers, a lot of DeAndre Swift's signature plays at the University of Georgia were made by great downfield blocks down the field. But I don't want my thought bubble here railroaded so much. Let's think about this, folks. And, Brandon, you can start the proceedings here. What else does Georgia need? I'm giving you two big checks right now. Dominant defense, dominant tailback playmaker, strong run game against anybody. What can they get, and what do they need? So I want you to think of what does Georgia need to win these big ball games coming up, and what do you feel they can realistically muster up offensively?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of half seriously, half kidding said this before. I've downgraded my expectations about 4 different times this year. Now they're obviously lower than they have been. Just stay at a 3rd and long. Just at least try to do that. Don't let them score, the opposing defense, and try to stay at a 3rd and long. And if you can do those two things, you're at least going to hang around. And if you hang around, there's a chance that good things can happen. Because, Connor, as I said before, I think we in Georgia are conditioned to think that the only way that luck shows up in a game is the bad variety. There is such a thing as good luck. And Georgia, by virtue of being in the game, puts itself in a position to potentially benefit from some good luck if it can just hang around long enough.
I eventually the breaks go your way.
Yeah.
And Georgia, at this point in the year, has gotten some of those breaks. I would say the onside kick a week ago against Auburn, breaking the way that did, that is considered a break for Georgia. The fumble caused by Richard LeCount tonight, there were people in the press room who were saying that very easily could have been called stop forward progress. Wasn't called that way. Georgia forces a turnover there and puts up three pretty huge, obviously you want a touchdown there, but they get three pretty huge points because of that. So, yes, Georgia has caught their fair share of bad breaks, but one, you make your own luck in this game and in life in general. And two, I think eventually you do this long enough, they start to go your own way.
Different point on this, Jeff, real quick, it kind of brings it up. I know A&M fans are going to argue this. To me, it's unfair to say forward progress, because he's fighting to get to the chains at that point in time. So the idea of if they do whistle forward progress and he ends up a half foot short, all of a sudden they're mad about the different thing. So you understand what I'm saying? The A&M fans are going to say, oh, well, you should have ruled him down and stopped the play before the fumble occurred. But they were keeping the play alive to see if he could get to the first down chain.
Yeah, let him play. I think what most people would feel when they watch any sort of – when they see those plays like that, those contested plays, those effort plays, let them play. Don't be the guy that tweets the whistle out and stops that right there. I mean, big play in the game. I mean, you talk about fortunate as well. I mean, I'm sure the A&M nation is hanging their hat on. Be curious to hear what Jimbo Fisher said about the game afterward, whether he gave a lot of credit to Georgia's defensive effort or whether he brought up a couple of pass interference penalties that may have went against Tyreek Stevenson that weren't called.
Well, if Jimbo and his hair plug say that, here's what I'm going to say back in response to him. He helped Georgia out today twice, I thought. Let me start with the most recent and kind of work my way back. When he made the decision to punt on 4th and 11 with about 4 minutes to go, having all 3 timeouts, that to me is a huge tactical error because, I mean, first of all, you can stop Georgia's, and I'm not trying to be snarky, I'm just trying to be honest. At midfield or at the 20, you can stop Georgia's offense either place. You got 3 timeouts. You're really supposed to give yourself an extra chance there on the 4th and 11 play. If you don't have a 4th and 11 play in your playbook, then what are you even making the trip from College Station for? I thought that was frankly, a very surprising act. And then prior to that, I thought it was a tactical error on Jimbo's part. On one of the Rodrigo field goals, he declines a penalty to make it 4th down as opposed to a 3rd and long play would have taken Georgia out of field goal range when the Georgia offense really hasn't been doing a ton all day long. I thought Jimbo – so if he wants to complain about officiating, I'm going to point to 2 strategic errors that Jimbo made that absolutely made winning a lot easier for Georgia.
The thing that I just keep coming back to is I think the way Georgia will play these football games, Brandon, and maybe if somebody's just jumping in, when someone starts to run the football on Georgia, that's when I'll feel this team and where it's going and what it can't get done offensively is in trouble. 20 carries, 1 yard with a dual threat quarterback.
Yeah, and obviously some of that's going to be sack aided, but even if you take the sacks out, A&M cannot. First of all, that team is soft as a pillow, and once you have that in your program, it's hard to get it out. I think Jimbo's a really good coach, but man, when you got that disease of softness, that disease of lack of physicality in your program, it is hard to scrub that off. I mean, that is like getting a dead skunk in your basement. You cannot get that smell out of your program. A&M is soft, and Jimbo is going to have a lot of work to do to get that fixed. I mean, you can't, obviously I don't expect them to run the ball well, but when you don't even leave with a skinny positive yard rushing the football today, that's a tough situation for the Aggies.
There's no way you're going to beat Georgia, I think, this year if you don't run the football. Let's face it. I mean, in the LSU, great offense, and let's get them an update. LSU's doing LSU things now against Arkansas. I think at the half, I think it's now 28-7. I think we're looking at right there.
That's also under the first half line for those of you who care about that kind of thing.
When LSU and Georgia meet, that's going to be a great football game. I think we've seen a lot of people coming together, making that point that it's 2 different ways of playing football.
All right,
Can I make a point?
Yeah, by all means. And after this, we're gonna get off the air.
So remember the Sugar Bowl last year was not a great Georgia performance by any means, correct? No. And a lot of people were saying it mattered and what this means going forward. And, I think you and I and a couple other level-headed people said doesn't mean anything. New year, new team. Go ask Texas fans how they feel about that Sugar Bowl right now because they are 6-5 after getting just rolled by Baylor today. For all the struggles and ups and downs about Georgia and how they've played this year, this team is 10-1. And they play a pretty bad Georgia Tech team next week to go at 11-1. It is incredibly hard to go 11-1 in college football back-to-back years, 3 straight years, and this Georgia team is going to do that. I know it hasn't always been pretty, but this team has kept its head on straight, and it has won the games it is supposed to. Yes, there was the loss to South Carolina. Yes, the loss to LSU last year. But if you're a Georgia fan right now, this is exactly the situation in place you want this team to be. They're one of the, I think, 4 teams in this country right now, Clemson, LSU, and Ohio State, that control their own destiny going into the college football playoff.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that's a great way to kind of end it. Pella Window post-game show here today. By the way, huge thanks to Pella Window and Door for making it all possible. They can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. They got great savings for you right now as well. Let me make sure I tell you about a couple of these things. First of all, you can get up to 40% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 48 months. That offer is only valid, though, through January 9th. So take advantage of that. This is the cold weather time of year. You turn that heat on. If you got bad windows and bad doors, that stuff is escaping out the crevices. You don't want that to happen. By installing your house with energy-efficient windows and doors, the kind that Pella Window and Door can provide for you, you can actually potentially save money on your heating bill, your energy bill. That's great savings. So PellaSoutheast.us, that's the website, PellaSoutheast.us, or you can give them a call and sort of set up an appointment time there at their Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. That's 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. Before I get a final thought from both Jeff and Connor here, let me also say a huge thanks to the UGA Bookstore for being gracious hosts for us all year long. Got the SEC East Championship T-shirt on right now. I'm proud of this thing, proud of the shirt, proud of the accomplishment. 3 years in a row for Georgia there in that regard for the first time in program history. And this is the kind of thing that the UGA Bookstore is just filled with. We're up here on the second floor. They're down there on the first floor with all the apparel for Christmas gifts and things like that. There's really no better place to kind of stock up for all the dog fans in your life than here at the UGA Bookstore. It's my favorite place to come shopping for some UGA apparel. I know you'll kind of find that same way. And boy, for what seems like, I guess now our 16, 17, this is our 4th year of wrapping up here post-game shows, the UGA Bookstore. That's amazing. And amazing how much time flies by. And, you know, I truly am sorry that some folks are really, really not seeing what they want to see from the Georgia offense. And I understand where you're coming from on this. I guess my final takeaway in all this is, as Connor said before, even with those struggles, Georgia still finds itself on the precipice of really being a part of something big here as the season comes to an end. And I wouldn't trade anything for the chance to be, you know, between the hedges here at Dooley Field and Sanford Stadium, enjoying another year of this kind of stuff. Sad to think we won't be back here again until April. Amazing how quickly time flies as you keep getting older like I do. But I've enjoyed the season. I'm excited to see where it goes next. I'm ready to kind of ride the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys, and kind of everything else in between, including next Saturday when it comes to clean old-fashioned hay. Jeff, how about a final thought from you?
Georgia's in the SEC championship game as the East representative for the 3rd time in a row. You got to go back to an Alabama team in the 90s, a Florida team in the 90s, and then an Alabama team this decade as well. That, folks, is some history for the program. It doesn't matter, you know, what the scorecard looks like on a lot of that. This is a senior day for a lot of galvanizing players in this program. It will be awfully tough for anybody that follows this program to say goodbye to guys like Rodrigo Blankenship, Tay Crowder, Brian Harrion, Tyler Clark. The list goes on with a lot of deserving David Marshall, a lot of guys that definitely don't have any eligibility left after Sanford Stadium this year. And then you got guys like Jake Fromm, you got guys most especially like Andrew Thomas and DeAndre Swift, where it certainly feels like those guys have probably played their last game inside Sanford Stadium as well. There's a lot of high notes. The defensive play, 20 carries, -1 yard. Georgia seems to find a way to suffocate any offensive system it goes up against, and they're going to have a shot in any football game they play the rest of the year.
Connor, how about a quick final thought from you?
This Georgia team is 10-1. Enjoy it. Credit to these seniors and some of these juniors, specifically DeAndre Swift and Andrew Thomas, who I think shared a very nice moment with Kirby Smart after the game. 42 wins for the senior class, and this Georgia team, as much as they've struggled, as ugly as it has looked at times, This is where you want this team to be controlling their own destiny, winning out, and potentially having a chance to get themselves into the playoff on their own petard.
Sounds like Sparky's giving it a little bit of an effort against Oregon right now, so we may have some fun football to watch later on tonight. So y'all enjoy the rest of the weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning for Dog Nation Daily. Thanks for being a part of our Pella Window post-game show here at the UGA Bookstore. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll look forward to talking to you again next week for Clean Old Fashioned Hate. We'll enjoy doing that with you again here at this time. Thanks so much.